It started with laughter. The kind that rolls through a crowded hall and makes you feel like the smallest person in the room. Commander Jack Danner stood there in his old, faded flight jacket, creased, sun-worn, and stitched with a name that had once meant something. He was there because his teenage son, Luke, had begged him to come to the Navy Aviation Heritage Banquet. "Dad, you were a pilot. You belong there," Luke had said, his eyes bright with pride. But as Jack stood beneath the chandeliers and brass insignias, he felt like a ghost haunting a world that had long moved on without him. In the middle of that elegant hall, surrounded by medals and laughter, 3 Navy Admirals, men who had never seen him before, decided to make a little joke at his expense. One of them, Admiral Rains, smirked as he raised his glass and asked, "So, old-timer, what was your call sign back in the day?" The question drew a few chuckles from the officers nearby. Jack hesitated. He could have brushed it off, could have smiled politely and walked away. But instead, he looked up, his eyes calm, steady, and filled with something none of them could quite name. "Valor Phantom," he said softly. The laughter stopped. A few faces turned. For a second, the air itself seemed to still. Because that call sign, Valor Phantom, wasn't just a nickname. It was a legend. Speech balloon if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of quiet heroes. Please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe. Every click helps stories like this reach more hearts that need them. Jack Danner had once been the Navy's quiet miracle. A pilot who didn't talk much, who didn't show off, but who always brought his team home. His story wasn't written in medals or framed on walls. It was written in the lives of the people he saved, the missions that went wrong, the skies that turned red, and the moments where courage didn't roar, it whispered, "Hold on." 15 years earlier, Jack's name had echoed across the radios of an entire fleet. During a disastrous rescue operation in the Pacific, a squadron of 4 aircraft had been caught in a freak storm. 2 went down immediately. Jack was the third. He should have died, but instead, he fought the controls for over an hour, guiding his crippled A-10 toward the sinking wrecks of his teammates. When command ordered him to eject, he refused. He stayed, holding steady above the ocean waves, relaying coordinates, and guiding the search helicopters through lightning and wind. He lost an engine, then another, but he didn't bail until every last pilot was found. His plane hit the water miles off the grid, and for 3 days he drifted, burned, half-conscious, and alone, until a fisherman found him. They called him Valor Phantom after that. The man who appeared out of nowhere, risked everything, then vanished. But what the Navy never told the world was what that storm took from him. Jack never fully recovered. The crash had crushed his spine, ending his flight career. His wife couldn't handle the long hospital nights, the silence, the guilt, and she left. All that remained was Luke, then only 4 years old, standing beside his father's bed, holding his hand. For years, Jack raised his son alone. He worked odd jobs, janitor, mechanic, supply driver, anything to keep the lights on and Luke in school. His medals sat in a shoebox under the bed. He never talked about his service, never mentioned Valor Phantom. Not because he was ashamed, but because it hurt to remember who he used to be. Now, standing in that banquet hall, surrounded by the polished, powerful faces of the Navy elite, Jack felt that old ache again. The admirals who had mocked him were silent now. One of them, Admiral Torres, frowned and said quietly, "That can't be right, the Valor Phantom?" Jack nodded once, his expression unreadable. He didn't crave their awe or their apologies. The silence. Jack began to speak, his voice low, steady, and full of memory. He didn't talk about glory. He didn't talk about medals or ranks. He talked about fear. About the sound of a dying engine over black water. About the men whose voices cracked on the radio when they realized they might not make it home. About the way the ocean looks when lightning hits it at night, like the sky is crying. As he spoke, the room transformed. The admirals who had laughed moments before now sat with their heads bowed. Younger officers leaned forward, hanging on every word. Even the servers had stopped moving. Jack's story wasn't just about war. It was about love. About a father's promise to his son that he'd always find a way back. About learning to live with pain, to raise a child when you can barely stand, to keep believing that tomorrow might still hold light. When he finished, there was no applause, just silence. The kind that comes when hearts are too full to speak. Then, quietly, Admiral Raines stood. "Commander Danner," he said, his voice trembling. "On behalf of the United States Navy, I apologize. And I thank you for your service, and for reminding us what valor truly means." One by one, every man and woman in uniform rose to their feet. They saluted him. Not because of his rank, not because of his medals, but because they finally saw him. Not as a relic, but as a man who had given everything and asked for nothing in return. Luke looked at his father, tears in his eyes. For the first time, Jack let himself smile, not the polite kind, but a real one. The kind that said maybe it was worth it. After the banquet, several officers came to shake his hand. One young pilot whispered, "Sir, I joined because of the story of Valor Phantom. I never thought I'd meet you." Jack simply nodded. "Then fly for those who never came back," he said softly. That night, as they drove home in their old pickup, Luke couldn't stop talking. "Dad, did you see their faces? You showed them. You showed them who you are." Jack chuckled, eyes on the road. "No, son," he said. "I showed them who we can be." When they pulled into their driveway, Luke fell asleep in the passenger seat, his head resting against the window. Jack sat there for a long moment, looking at the stars above. They looked a lot like the ones he used to fly through, distant, endless, and somehow comforting. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, worn photo, a picture of him holding baby Luke on the airstrip years ago, both of them smiling despite the wind and noise. Jack brushed his thumb over it. "You're my real mission, kid," he whispered. "Always were." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by night and memory, Valor Phantom finally felt at peace.